Well, good morning, everyone. It's good to see everyone here at the Nebraska East Union this morning. And I know we're being joined, as usual, by web stream, by our colleagues across the state, and a lot of folks, I'm sure, here on campus in their offices as well. Just as a point of note, this is the fifth of these all-hands meetings that we've had, I think, since early 2011. And we've kind of made a tradition, if you will, of gathering once a semester to update on a number of fronts, sometimes to learn about some new things that are developing and we want you to know about. And the same is true this morning. So I'm very pleased that we have a good audience here. And just as a reference point, if you remember last October, the last time we were together for the all hands deal in early October, we actually had almost 1,100 people plugged into this session, which I think is phenomenal, that we were able to communicate in that way and to have the opportunity to dialogue about kind of where we are in this journey around the Institute and what we're doing and why it's important and how we're doing it and how we need to be thinking about it moving forward. Now this morning we've got a lot to cover with you. You're probably not surprised by that. But we're going to do it a little bit differently than the way we've done it the previous 4 times. So I have a number of people who are going to be joining me in the program this morning. And I've done that intentionally because I want you to hear directly from them and hear about the efforts that they're leading and the tasks that they're taking on in some of these key areas for us. So the plan of how we're going to approach this is I'll spend a little bit of time with you up front here surveying the landscape around the budget largely and what we're looking at going into this next budget session. And I particularly want to talk to you about what's happening in Washington. And it's going to surprise you what I'm going to talk about. It's not going to be what you expect. It's not going to be about the election and the fiscal cliff and all the dogma and drama and whatever you call that that's been going on in Washington the last period of time. It's about some developments I think that are quite positive and that have some real opportunities ahead for us in the space that we're in ag and natural resources for the future, and I'm very excited about them. So I want you to know about them, and I want you to understand what some of that dialogue is opening up to be and how that may look in the coming years as it really unfolds. And then I want to give you an update on where we are, too, a little bit at home around the key goals that we're working on here within our greater plan. Then I'm going to turn it over to Ron Yoder. Now, we talked to you a little bit about the growth in faculty hiring that we're getting ready to launch into now with the positions coming out that we talked about in October and those areas that we had chosen to emphasize in these 36 new positions. So Ron's going to come and go through the mechanics of that with you and talk to you about how that's being rolled out, how we're going to do it, how those searches will be conducted, and a little bit more depth about how that will play out, especially pretty heavily beginning this semester in getting those positions in place. Then Dan's going to come, Dan Duncan, and he's going to give you the similar kind of thing on Innovation Campus. So he's going to tell you about where we really are, where that process is unfolding now as the dirt's moving and the buildings are beginning to go up in phase 1, and a little bit about the faculty side of that and how we're going into the discussion about what faculty may end up on phase 1 of Innovation Campus and the new partnership we just launched with ConAgra that you heard about last fall. Then Chuck Hibbard, who you were introduced to in October as our new Dean and Director of Extension, was going to come and talk about a little bit of his vision for UNL Extension, but I've especially challenged Chuck to talk about what the thinking is relative to the Rural Futures Institute, this new institute that we have just formalized and gotten approved through the board this fall and through the State Coordinating Commission on Higher Education in December. So we're right on the front end of that development. Extension by default is going to have a very large role in that institute, and Chuck's going to talk to that topic when he comes up. And then we're going to finish out with you being introduced to Mark Doyle, our new Director of Global Engagement, who I also announced to you in October. who joined us November 1st. And I've asked Mark to come and talk a little bit about our plan globally. And what we've been talking about in Brazil and what we've been talking about in China, what we've been talking about in India. What's the strategy for how that will unfold? And he'll give you a little bit of his initial thinking a couple of months into the job around that strategy. Mark and I are getting on a plane Saturday to go to China, so he can tell you a little bit about why we're doing that kind of thing and what the result we hope of that will be. And then we're going to spend a little bit of time honoring some people this morning. We have a series of awards that we're giving out, and the honorees of those awards are here that we haven't done for a while, called the Untitled Innovation Awards. And so we will be announcing those and honoring several groups with those Untitled Awards during our presentation as well. So let's set the stage here. Now I'm going to cover a lot of this very quickly. Yesterday at Ag Builders it took me an hour and 10 minutes. This morning it's going to take me 20, so keep me accountable. We always start these sessions by just reiterating a little bit. Some of this is repeat, but we need to keep these things in mind. Paying a little bit of attention to the outside world that's outside of Lincoln, Nebraska, outside of East Campus. And there's some big things happening out there in the world. We all know it. We don't always know how to read them or know what they're going to mean for us, but paying attention to them, I think, is critically important. We're still in this finding our feet globally economy situation. We know that. We know we're still on the tail end maybe of what's happening in Europe, and we don't know what that will play out to look like. Much of what's happening in Washington is associated with this whole issue of the global economy and what's ahead in that global economy from a policy perspective and thinking about what that might look like. So we're still there. We're not out of that yet. We still have some time ahead to find out what that's all going to mean for us. The state and local economy continues to defy the odds, even through the drought that we are now in. We're not out of by any means of imagination, we're in. We still have defied the odds within the economy. So the ag economy here, as I'm going to show you, still defied this past year those odds as well. This election that we just came through, not a lot seemed to change. I think most people would say that. At this point in time, we haven't inaugurated our president for his second term yet. That's coming up here very soon. But right now, most people would say, well, it doesn't appear that a lot of things have changed politically in Washington at this point. But some things are going to have to change in Washington. And we saw that drama play out quite dramatically right after the first of the year with the whole fiscal cliff situation in DC and the kicking the can down the road, so to speak, a bit on that, but it still has these a couple big steps yet to come that are ahead of us that Congress and the President are going to be dealing with. And the Farm Bill, of course, we know that we've been waiting on a Farm Bill. It got delayed in the election battle, quite frankly, and it's still delayed. So we still have an extension of the Farm Bill, but we don't know what it might look like coming out the other side of that after this current year. And certainly the trademark of 2012 was the drought. Not just for us, we certainly are the epicenter of it in many, many ways, but it very, very widespread, as you know, in the effect of this drought across the U.S., across the continental U.S., in its severity and in its scope, in its spread. So that's the point on there that we're all the most nervous about. I'll be very frank about it in thinking about what that looks like for Nebraska, looks like for our state going into this budget setting session and what that might mean. So all eyes are on this map. Chuck spent quite a bit of time with the Ag Builders group yesterday talking about what UNL Extension has done during this drought, how they continue to try to address the needs of producers in the state in order to mitigate the effects of the drought and plan their way forward, depending upon how long and the severity of the drought might continue. Not a lot of hope right now, quite frankly, in what the weather patterns show us in coming out of this in the near term. So we're watching that very close, even with the little bit of moisture we've had, and certainly this morning is a freak kind of deal for us. Any moisture in any form is wonderful. So, but this recent moisture is not really catch-up. It's just normal. So we got a lot of catch up to do yet to be at a point where we're past this. I showed you these numbers last time and I want to reiterate them because I want to put this past year on top of them now. The 2011 data for ag in this state have been unbelievable. And we've seen unprecedented levels of profitability in agriculture. We've seen unprecedented levels of asset growth in agriculture. And the epicenter, and I use that word, I'm not using it loosely here, the epicenter of that has been the state. The epicenter of that asset growth, the epicenter of the profitability has largely been centered on Nebraska. Iowa claims a little bit of that too. Minnesota claims a little bit of that too, but nowhere has it been more dramatic than here in the state of Nebraska. And the asset generation and turnover of that, we're watching that very carefully for a lot of reasons in the state, both long-term for the good of the state and potentially long-term for the good of the university as well. We see that in prices. These are commodity data from last week that show the difference between last week this year and last week a year ago. All categories almost, at least the categories that affect us here in Nebraska, all up. Some of that drought driven and demand driven because of supplies and stocks and the picture that's created by a lower harvest last year and low stocks that are out there. But this is part of what's contributing again to even a good year in a drought in terms of profitability for agriculture of people in the state. I showed you this slide in October, and I just added one little arrow to it that you see there at the end, in anticipating in what 2012 will look like coming off of that bumper year of 2011, the year before. We know it's going to be down. We don't have the final data yet, but the pundits tell us they expect it to still be above the average line, above that trend line there over the course of the years that are out there. Much of that in Nebraska, let's be very frank about it, is due to what? Water. And due to irrigation that was available for people to use to come out from underneath the drought. The livestock people won't have as pretty a picture here, but the crop people do have a pretty healthy picture because of the use of water during that time period. We can't do that long term, and we know that because it's not a sustainable thing for us to be considering. This is a new slide. It is absolutely blows my mind. And it's got a lot of folks kind of wondering about the word bubble and wondering whether asset growth and farmland value growth is long-term and real or not, or whether it's inflated. So you get the general picture. But you look at Nebraska relative to even Iowa and South Dakota around us, this is last year. Growth in average asset value last year. Okay, 47% in the state of Nebraska. Doug Stark's the CEO of Farm Credit Services of America. So, that is just almost unbelievable for all of us that are involved in this business. And it's something we have to pay attention to, both in terms of whether it's overvalued and in terms of whether it's the new norm. We don't know yet where that might be. You know this, reiterate it, this is the center of what we do. This is the center of what's driving our decisions. This is the center of why JB stood up again yesterday at ABN and said, again, this is the central point of the university moving forward in terms of investments that we need to make. Now let's talk about the state budget. We have a state legislature that convened last week. They are in a budget setting session for the biennium, where the biennium starts July 1st of this year for fiscal year 2014 and for fiscal year 2015. So it's a 2-year budget setting session for the legislature, what they refer to as the long session of the 2-year legislature. And they have new leadership. So there were a number of new senators that came on board first of the year, 11 of them. They are new to the chamber, with the exception of Ernie Chambers, who has decided to return. Ernie's an icon in this state, as many of you know. And there's new leadership in the legislature, new speaker, new chairs of the majority of the committees, including the very important Appropriations Committee to us, who has the new chair, Heath Mello from Omaha. Well, and congratulations to Senator Mello. That was a little bit of a surprise, I think, to Heath and to the legislature, because Tom Hansen, as you know, lost that chair by 1 vote. That Appropriations Committee has a very different composition to it than what we have worked with in the past legislature. So it's going to be an interesting session, seeing how they grapple with the issues that are ahead. They are inheriting a $442 million cash reserve at this point. They do have revenues that have come in over projections in the previous forecasts that are $111 million above projections in recent time. But the forecasters predict in that biennium still a $190 million deficit. Now, they tend to be very conservative, as we know, in the way that they forecast. So this is overall a very good picture for the state budget. But they have a few things they've got to pay attention to as they go about that appropriation. They have Medicaid to take care of. They have water to take care of in the natural resources side. They have K through 12 state aid to education that the governor said in his State of the State on Tuesday that he hopes for a 5% increase in state aid to schools. So there are significant draws on the budget here within that overall picture, if you will, and including the roads bill that Senator Fisher, now U.S. Senator Fisher, put in place when she was in the legislature in the last session. It comes off the top of state appropriation, or state revenues, if you will, in the budget to fund that infrastructure for roads and bridges across the state. So there's a number of things here that they're going to be balancing as they move forward. Now, I want you to just see these figures right up front that describe our budget and our budget request that's going to the legislature within that appropriations process. So this is our state-aided budget. So the University of Nebraska system, all of our campuses in the system, and the appropriations that we get from the state make up about 63% of our state appropriated dollars, or our state-funded dollars. Tuition is counted also as part of our state-funded dollars, makes up a remaining large part of that gap. The right-hand part of the slide shows you where those state dollars go in our budget. And it's kind of the 80-20 rule. A little more than 80% of those state dollars are used to fund people. So it's a people-intense budget, if you will, that we use those state dollars to fund salaries and benefits. This is what our trajectory has been the last 10 years on state appropriations to the university. Not a surprise here, they've been flat the last 5 years, and we've always said, you've heard me say it's a wonderful thing they've been flat, because we've maintained, while many states have been in a much downward spiral on these kinds of numbers. So it's been a positive situation, but you can't do that long term, because you know when you put inflation over top of that you are declining in real dollars. So you're gradually eating your budget away in order to fund those base operations when you factor in price index and inflation. So that's the picture where we've been. Now you have heard the governor and President Milliken the last few weeks talk about this affordability compact that has been proposed to the legislature. Governor Heineman addressed this on Tuesday when he addressed the legislature and said that if we increase state appropriated dollars to the University of Nebraska system and the state college system, there's a plank of this on the state colleges as well, by 4.2 was our request, 4.2% per year of the biennium, which totals to about $45 million increase over the 2 years by the end of the second year of the biennium, that we would freeze tuition for resident students. So we would hold tuition, hold affordability, if you will, on tuition for resident students, not non-resident, but only resident students of the state of Nebraska. That also has the inherent ask in it, and we've already been talking about this at the system level, that we hold our fees static. So that the only justification for any fee increase is real dollar value on those fees, that there's not a way of inflating the value and recovering those dollars through other avenues than tuition, through fees, and we're going to be working hard to do that. Now I wanted to show you what the net of that is to us. So to be totally provincial here, what does that mean for IANR? So the University of Nebraska-Lincoln is about half of the university's overall budget of the system. We are a little under 28% of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's budget within the Institute of Ag and Natural Resources on state dollars, based on state dollars. So when you net that out, that's a little under $6 million in permanent base funding that would increase in our budget in IANR. Now you can imagine when JB first started talking about this last fall, I was thinking this is a pretty cool thing. And the reason I was thinking it was a pretty cool thing was I was saying that's where our phase 2 positions are going to come from. Because you heard us talk about 36 new faculty in the fall and 20 more in phase 2 that we have planned into this growth phase over the next 5 years, some of which we had funding for already. This helps us finish that funding and do some other things as well if this happens, if we're fortunate getting through that appropriation cycle to make it happen. Now I want to switch now. So closing off the state, I'm very optimistic. And you've heard me say that before, that I'm actually optimistic about the state budget. I think I'm even more optimistic this year because I think all the signs are good. The only nagging kind of nit out there is what is the effect of the drought? You know, and what is the effect if we do get rid of a state income tax? Don't know. Don't know if that'll happen. The governor certainly wants to see that happen. But you know where a lot of the money for that would come from if in fact that happened. Quiz? Who can answer the question? Ag exemptions. So there's a big chunk of that would come from exemptions and sales tax on ag exemptions that are out there. So it's shifting where that tax burden would be, and some of that would impact us, would impact our clientele that's out there as well. So I'm optimistic that in the end the state budget's going to be quite positive for us. Now let's talk about Washington. There's some things that are lining up in Washington, if they were to play out successfully, that could be quite positive. Now, I know that I'm not going to get into politics here and talk about whether you like the guy on the slide or you don't like the guy on the slide, and whether you're red or whether you're blue or any of that kind of stuff. But the fact of the matter is that there have been some calls in Washington, some pretty serious ones, for increasing our investments in science and technology. And I want to tell you a little bit about that and tell you how that could impact agriculture if the cards play out right. There's several groups out there that are working hard on this agenda. They are NGOs largely, or they're foundation groups that are working hard to re-pitch, if you will, the importance for food, agriculture, natural resource investments in science and technology at the federal level, and that we need to do that differently. Now, all of these have had big think tanks for the last year, better than the last year, leading up to whoever the new administration would be, whether it was a Romney administration or whether it was an Obama second-term administration, arguing for why we are so underinvested in this arena currently relative to the need that's out there and relative to what's happening around the world in some other countries that are investing when we're not. And we're losing ground against them, quite frankly. And these groups are pretty serious about that. During the month of October, when we met October 1st, in the next 30 days, I met with all 4 of these. And they were having think tanks with leaders from around the world, both public and private, in talking about how you reformulate that thinking. At the same time, while that was going on, President Obama had asked in early 2012 for his council and advisors on science and technology, what's known as PCAST. It's a permanent part of the White House Office on Science and Technology Policy in DC. A lot of these are National Academy members, National Academy of Engineering, National Academy of Sciences members from around the country that serve on PCAST. And he had asked them to study agriculture and the food space specifically, about what should be done to invest differently in the agriculture and food space. And the report of that group came out about a month and a half ago in early December. I would encourage you to read this report. It's not a hard read. I would encourage you to go to the web and read this report because it has some significant things in it that, if they are paid attention to, could reformulate the way we think about doing agricultural research, education, and extension, and bolster it quite a bit. It calls for an increased investment of $700 million a year at the federal level. Currently, we invest about 2.7 in total over everything we do, including the Ag Statistics Service, including the Economic Research Service, including the Ag Research Service, including competitive funding, and NIFA as we know it. That's a significant investment. But what's more important is the way they call for that increased investment. That it's called for not specifically in USDA, that it's called for as much so outside of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And you've heard me say before, I think this is smart. I think this is what needs to be done, that we need to start thinking this way. So doubling the basic research budget for food and agriculture topics at NSF and raising that level. Doubling essentially the competitive grants arm of NIFA, so the Ag Food Research Initiative that we play in quite heavily within the competitive grants at USDA, and raising that to $500,000. Now, enough of you are gray hairs like me in the room that know how long it took to get to $265 million. Deb's grinning at me. She was right in the middle of that. So it's taken a long time to get to 265. Going to 500 is a big jump, but I don't think it's out of the question, given the challenges that are ahead. $180 million in new funding for graduate students and postdocs in the food and ag space that may be in USDA, may be augmented by others outside of USDA. I've highlighted this red one because I think it has significant underpinnings for Nebraska, where they're calling for the development of 6 innovation clusters in the heartland, is the language that is used, that are public-private partnerships that leverage both public dollars and private dollars in this space to innovate the next generation of agriculture. That could have significant ramifications for us, because I think we are positioned quite well to be the hub of one of those. And those are significant $25 million a year for 5 years, kind of funding models around those innovation clusters. And by the way, we're developing an innovation campus around food, fuel, and water. So I think that's something we're paying very, very careful attention to. And then an advisory committee for the USDA is called for of scientists to advise the chief scientist at USDA on all these matters. I also was asked just recently to join this group. The National Academy of Sciences has answered the call. Kathy Wotecki at USDA actually asked for this review of the competitive grants program at USDA. So during the coming year, this panel will be reviewing those programs and reviewing the way dollars are used, the way dollars are allocated, whether the priorities are correct, and whether the funding needs to be increased. So it follows on to, if you will, the PCAST report that you just saw, working specifically on that 265 to 500 million portion of the puzzle. I'm very pleased to be asked to be part of that group. Quite honestly, I think I'm the token animal person there. I'll just tell you the way I read the cards, because there's been quite a bit of criticism of AFRI the last several years about funding for animal research within the graded portfolio, and I think I'm the token animal person that's on there for that purpose. But I plan to use that platform to help that agenda in raising that funding and using that funding well moving forward. So let's talk a little bit about the university and where we are in our goals. I summed it up into one slide. So this is where we are relative to these big goals that we're on the journey forward to 2017. Okay? We're doing our part and more, and I applaud us for that within the education side. So when we talk about this 5,000 student growth, getting to 30,000 students by 2017, we continue to increase our enrollment. The spring census data were out yesterday. For the current enrollment, we're up 5% in Kasner over a year ago enrollment. So we continue to be in that 4, 5, 6, 7, 8% range for increase every reporting period. So we're doing our part. We're continuing to increase. One thing I think we all have in our mind is we increase quality as well as quantity. And I want to underline that we also are paying attention to increasing the quality of our students at the same time, and we need not forget that. But the university has a challenge ahead of it. We're going to have to pull a lot of weight here, real frankly, because we're not increasing overall at the university level on that goal. In fact, we lost a little this year, as you know, and we got ground to cover up. Now, the admissions people tell us that fall looks quite good, especially on out-of-state students. Steve quoted these numbers yesterday to ABN, where it looks like our applications and our early deposits are up in a huge way for out-of-state students for fall of 2013, which is a good sign, and we're way up as well. Kasner is up in our early predictions, and that continues to go well. So 8 years of continued growth, I talked a lot about that last time, has helped us do a lot of things, and it will continue to help us do a lot of things. Our research funding last year was great. We're on track again this year to have a similar kind of successful year. So the research goals appear to be on track for us. 6-year graduation rate, I told you before, I want that to be 85%. I'm really interested in following the dialogue out there in higher ed right now, which is talking a lot about whether our metrics are right or not. And one of the things they're talking a lot about is graduation rates, whether we should be measuring outcomes of the students rather than graduation, and whether the 6-year deal is the right metric or not, and all of that. I'm still paying for students, so I still think it's got to be in there somewhere. Increasing our faculty, you know about, we're going to hear a lot about that this morning. That is a fabulous thing to be doing. We've got it funded. Now we got to get these people hired. Ron's going to talk to you about that. And leading on Innovation Campus, which Dan's going to talk to as well. Foundation, I'm very pleased that we have been able to add to our development efforts just in the last month. He's sitting here somewhere. I saw him. Josh, where are you at? So Josh Egley joined the foundation December 1st on our side of the house. He was at the foundation before as a development director for arts and sciences downtown. Grew up in Madison, Nebraska, so he knows the rural parts of the state well. And he's going to be focused on the life sciences areas of our portfolio and the natural resources sides of our portfolio. So helping Ann, who's sitting right beside him, who was promoted to Senior Development Director at the foundation in July. So we now have 2 full-time development directors at the foundation to help us on our way in meeting these targets of raising funds to underpin our programs. We continue to grow that campaign figure. We're now over $100 million. And moving forward, this is a little split of how Ann and Josh are engaging the units. They'll be talking to the units about this this spring, and where we've made them point, if you will, in different parts of the Institute as we move that forward. Here's where we're focusing those efforts with them and with you. There are 2 key priorities here in the top part of this slide. One is that we finish the vet diagnostic lab and that we get that $4 to $5 million. We're still jockeying on exactly how much we have to raise right up front with the legislature on the scope of the project, but getting that done. And we're spending a lot of time right now working on that. Josh and I were in New York last week meeting with Pfizer Animal Health about that. We're going to be meeting with a number of the other pharma companies the first week of February about that. So getting that knocked out and those shovels in the dirt is our first priority to get that to happen. And then you heard me mention this last time. In our next all-hands meeting next fall, I intend to bring a list of these 25 chairs to you and say, these are the 25 chairs we're raising money for. I hope we'll have a few of them raised. And say, these are new presidential chairs that we're putting in place to undergird the strength of our research, teaching, and extension programs in key priority areas, both in augmenting people we have already and in bringing some new people to our campus as well. So we're going to be working hard on that over the coming months, both with Josh and Ann and the deans and the unit heads. And then funding Innovation Campus. And Dan's going to put his plug in for this. I know I've heard him do it already in the last 2 days, of the need to finish out the fundraising on Innovation Campus, which we're now in the process of building, as you'll hear about. So the Vet Diagnostic Lab, it's a great development for us, $50 million project. We need to raise, we think now around a little over $4 million privately in order to fund that project, because it's not going to cost as much to build it as we had thought when we went to the legislature, so the scope is reduced just a bit on the fundraising end as well. We have raised a couple $100,000 from various groups privately already, the cattlemen in particular, Farm Bureau in particular, Nebraska Veterinary Medical Association in particular, and the reality is we're putting in half that money. So we've got about 2.2 million already raised of that goal to get there, and we expect that to happen soon. We continue to work with partnerships with industry, and there's some new ones on here from what I've shown you before. And in fact, Pfizer, when we were there last week, tells us they're quite interested in a Center for Beef Excellence here at the University of Nebraska. And they're interested in talking to us about that and how we might scope that with them. So these continue to grow. We continue to add other pieces to relationships we already have and are doing that on a routine basis. The campus master plan, I hope you've been engaged in some of those discussions where the consulting group has been talking about what the look of our campus might be long term and the investments we need to make in facilities. There was quite a bit of emphasis put on East Campus in that campus master plan discussion. And there's some significant changes in the ideas of what the campus might look like, particularly in terms of transportation flow, the way the street systems work, and some added expansion and growth considering residence halls and what that might look like as we grow and move forward. I'm looking forward to this getting done. How many of you, I'm curious, just those here in the union, how many of you actually use the rec center? Okay, so I know we're relocating and we've done that, but we're looking forward to this new facility being in place at the end of the year. You've seen this. I saw the big crane over there go up the other day. I thought, oh my God, this thing's going to fall over on East Campus. But this is the AGR house that was torn down this past summer, and construction is underway, and they hope to have it open in the fall for those students that are part of that group. And I've told you about the developments to the west that are planned. The ground will break on the first one of those in March, we're told, by the developers, and they want us to be a significant part of that. We're actually talking to them about a floor of that building in space that we would be involved in from IANR. Varner Hall's also talking about Online Worldwide being in that facility as well. So we're excited about those opportunities. Siwa Thompson, there is a group being led by Mark Balschweid and Larry Van Tassel that met for their first meeting, I believe, last week, Mark, is that right? To just start brainstorming about how we better utilize Siwa Thompson as a resource location, as a library location, and as a student learning location. Several of you are going to be asked to be part of that discussion, I know, throughout the spring semester. We mentioned these statues. You'll see those go up this spring. I did want to mention that we're making some significant investments outstate. At the Panhandle Research and Extension Center, we have a large renovation project that will unfold this spring out there, renovating the headquarters facility. It's almost a $4 million project. And we also just got the last funding to build a new facility at the High Plains Ag Lab at Sydney on High Plains agriculture, and that will be moving forward here in the next series of months as well. West Central, they just opened a new education center, and Don Adams tells me he needs more. Where's Don? There, he's over here somewhere. There he is, smirking at me. So, and the reason they need more is they need housing for 40 graduate students. I think that's phenomenal, to have 40 graduate students working with our scientists at West Central, and the need to be able to house them. So we're talking with Don and his team about launching that project here this year as well to be able to house that. Now, I told you I wanted to recognize a few groups, and we're going to do this fairly quickly. I'm just going to ask you to stand at this point to keep us on time because Chuck's given me the evil eye about you're talking too long. We have a series of awards that are traditional here at the Institute that we haven't given for a couple of years called the Omtwite Innovation Awards. They were funded originally by a gift by Neil and Lee Harlan who also fund the chair that I hold that many of you will recognize, the Harlan name. They've been very generous to IANR over the years, fund a number of scholarship programs as well in the Institute. And the idea of those awards is to recognize faculty, and I've added staff, to the Institute that innovate. That's why they're called Innovation Awards. They're honoring Untitled, who was the Vice Chancellor in the 1990s here at IANR. And what we've chosen to do is to give a number of these awards, a little bit of catch-up, real honestly, for not having given them the last 2 years, but also to give them in categories. So we announced in December at the staff holiday luncheon that we honored Barry Shull, who is our facilities guy who does all of this stuff I just talked about and much more, with one of those innovation awards. And he was honored there in this room at that holiday luncheon. We're giving a few more today, and I want to recognize these folks. First one is sitting right here. Bob Klein. Bob, would you stand up? I think most of you know Bob from North Platte. I think you got your 50-year pin 2 years ago, is that right? So it put in context the life of service that he has had to the University of Nebraska. And Bob's known as an innovator because he changed the face of High Plains agriculture in terms of conservation and a better use of water and a better cropping systems that are out there. Skip row planting, as many of you will know that term, was instrumental in the development of our Brewer facility that we've added to the capacity of North Platte even since he retired, and still is an instrumental part of Don Adams, his team at North Platte. So Bob, you're receiving an Untitled Innovation Award. Please give Bob a hand. I already mentioned Barry. We could not use the money that we have to sustain the facilities that we have and grow the facilities we have if we didn't have somebody that knew how to innovate in unbelievable ways like Barry does. And I know you all know that. If you've been involved in trying to figure out how to make something happen, Barry figures out how to make it happen. And he figures out how to make it happen with a lot less money. I love him. You know, so we honored Barry, as I said before. Barry, are you here? Yeah, Barry, please stand up and get a round of applause. Then we have 3 categories here. We have a teaching category, a research category, and an outreach category. And we're honoring teams that have made things happen. And the first person that we're honoring this morning is Jim Alfano. Jim, where are you at? Over here. Jim's right over here. Jim's a member of our faculty in plant pathology, and he was the spearhead to make the new microbiology major that we began offering this year. Get through the system. It was a long haul to get that done, as many of you will know, and Jim is directing and leading that effort now as an undergraduate major. Recent appointment to the American AAAS Fellow, which we're also very proud of him for. So Jim is receiving an Untitled Award for his work in developing the microbiology major. Please give Jim a round of applause. The next one in the research category is a team award, and I've told them they've got to figure out how to use this money amongst themselves, so I want to see that at the table when it happens. So it's the gut function, the original team that formed the gut function initiative as we know it. Now there are other members of that team now too, but these are the guys that built this thing and made it happen into a world-acclaimed group that we have here on our campus. They're not a special center. They don't have special needs. They've just done it. They've just made it happen. And they've done it within their department. They've been highly successful. They are known around the world for what they're doing. They're publishing at the very highest levels in the work that they're doing and cutting-edge understanding of the gut microbiome. It's cool stuff. And they've heard me talk about it, about how cutting edge I think that is. So Andy Benson, Bob Hutkins, Jens Walter. Jens, I see you dressed up today. Thanks, buddy. Jens and I have an ongoing dialogue about the fact that he has a jacket that he wore on his interview that hangs on the back of his door, and he pulls it out when he occasionally needs it. So congratulations to the gut function team. Thank you for what you do. And then in the outreach category, the timing for this one couldn't be better. The National Drought Mitigation Center that's housed in our School of Natural Resources, it is the entity that the world has looked to in these past 12 months in particular. So the maps, the pictures, the reports, the interviews that you hear about the drought come out of Hardin Hall. And a lot of people don't recognize that. So Mike Hayes and his team at the National Drought Mitigation Center, the help of the High Plains Regional Climate Center I know is integral to them, but we're recognizing Mike, your team at the the National Drought Mitigation Center. Please stand and be recognized by both of you guys. Now they've also got to figure out how to split up the money too. This is just a small way that we have. There are cash awards with these that we have of recognizing that excellence. We'll do this on a routine basis where we'll be recognizing groups like this throughout the year. Now I'm going to ask Ron Yoder to come up now, and Ron is going to switch into the gears of talking to you about how we're going to hire these people. So he's going to remind you of who we're hiring, and he's going to tell you a little bit about how we're going to go about doing it. Please welcome Ron. You want to do the roving? You want this one?
Does that sound about right? All right. Well, it's great to be here and talk with you about this morning. Ronnie has done a great job of laying out the things that we have to be really optimistic about and the great opportunities that we have in the Institute of Ag and Natural Resources. And certainly one of those opportunities is what I'm going to talk about now, is to fill 36 faculty positions. And many of you have had a lot of input into this. So as you might guess, this has not been a quick process getting to the point that we are right now. But we are at the point that we've all been hoping to get to, which is beginning to search for and identify and hire the people that we want to have in our institute as we have this opportunity to grow. So, which button? That, okay, good. It has been a process. It's been quite a long process, and it began in the summer of 2011. Ronnie had been here about a year, just about exactly a year at that point, and we had a retreat of the leadership at North Platte, and we discussed the areas that we saw within the Institute that were ripe for growth, the things that the state of Nebraska, the University of Nebraska, and the Institute of Agricultural and Natural Resources, where there were opportunities to grow the enterprise. And we identified 4 areas that you see on the screen. Those areas are, I hesitate to say no-brainers, but for those of us that know Nebraska and know the Institute, you ask, why did it take you a day and a half to come up with those 4 areas? Because we're academics. We have to talk about these things. But it's a very useful time because it began to set the tone and it began to build the relationships among unit leaders that we are now realizing the benefits from what started back then. So the next 2 slides here are just a little bit busy, and I'm not going to read them, much to your relief, I'm sure. But I want you to see the various steps that we've gone through. And in this particular slide, there are a couple of things that I want to highlight. One is that we wanted to have the input of all the folks that needed to have input into this process. So we asked the unit heads to speak with the faculty and to discuss within the units those things that the unit thought, the faculty in the unit thought were areas that could be strengthened and would lead to progress within the Institute. The other thing that I want to note here is that we wanted the units then to come up with a draft plan that could be discussed with the deans in the Dean's Council, and then leading to this next second busy slide, such that by June 1st of 2012, we would have a relatively polished plan for each unit. And then over the next 2 months, June and July, the unit heads could speak among themselves, could discuss this, such that in the second retreat at the end of July of 2012, we would identify the positions that we wanted to fill. That's not exactly the way it worked. Two things I want to say. One is that the conversations among the unit heads had begun much earlier than we anticipated, which was great. And there was conversation about how can we build these multidisciplinary teams that we need to build to be addressing the pressing issues and the opportunities that we have. So that had begun earlier than we anticipated, and it was great. The second thing I want to say is that the unit heads said to us, we don't think that that retreat in July is when we ought to identify the positions. That's when we ought to identify the big picture, and then we can go back into the units, among the units, and identify the positions. So we delayed into September then the process whereby the individual positions that were to be requested, that did not happen until September rather than in July. So by September, each unit provided their list of requested positions. At the end of September, the last week of September, and this says something about our ability to schedule wisely, the week that we had the sesquicentennial commemoration of the Hatch Act was the week that we as the Dean's Council met one evening until about 10 o'clock to decide which of the positions that had been submitted were the positions that we wanted to put on the list of positions to be filled. And then they were announced at the October 1st all-hands meeting. So I'm going to go through with you the positions that are to be filled. And I think you can see that this is a relatively large undertaking because there are more than 30 positions. There are 36 positions. And one of the reasons that I will offer, not as an excuse, but as a reason as to why this process has moved along relatively slowly, is that when we started this process, we were thinking we might be able to fill 12 positions. As time went by, we realized that we were able to identify resources to fill nearly or 3 times that number of positions. So it grew. As we moved through the process, it grew. There are 5 focus areas and core positions. Core positions are from a list that we developed. We realized early in the process that there are some positions in units that probably will not fit within the major topic areas that we're highlighting and emphasizing to strengthen, but they are critical to the unit. Maybe there's a new opportunity, maybe a partner has come to a unit and said, we're willing to help support a position, or maybe there's an opportunity for funding, external funding, or maybe it's an existing area that has been extremely strong, is extremely strong in the unit, and someone is retired or is leaving. So we felt that it was important that each unit have the opportunity, if they had that sort of position, that they could submit a request for a core position that wasn't submitted within one of the 5 major topic areas. So the 5 core positions that we have here, it turns out it is 5, that we will be searching for are those types of positions. And as we move forward in additional cycles, we will always have that opportunity for the units to identify these core positions that are critical to the unit and to put forth requests for those positions. So the 5 areas then, this is the first, science literacy. And let me just say a little bit about the structure of how we have proceeded in the past 6 to 12 months and will be proceeding as we do these searches. We have a working group for each one of these major topic areas. The working group is made up of a liaison from the Dean's Council, 2 unit heads, and those 2 unit heads, the unit leads for each working group, were selected because of their expertise and their interest in the particular area. And then the working group is made up of any unit head that wants to be part of that working group. And I've been personally quite gratified with how well these working groups have come together and how well they have communicated not only within the group, but between the groups. So science literacy is the first of the 5 areas. And I think most of us in this room have an appreciation for the fact that when we talk to lay people, whether they're young lay people, as in school, children in school, or adults, people who do not work in a science area do not always have a good grasp of things that are very important to us in communicating our message to them about agriculture, about science in general. Now, it says science literacy here. Implicit in this is that agriculture and the life sciences will be a key part of the education, the science literacy education that we will be working with. So these are the 3 positions that we will be filling that will be related to our initiating a strong effort in science literacy. Stress biology is the second area that we identified, and we actually have 3 sub-areas within the larger area of stress biology. This particular one is related to plants. You see the positions there. And this also, I should note, some of these positions came out of other working groups and are shown here, but many of these positions actually, if you think of a Venn diagram, many of these positions actually overlap with one or more of the major categories. And for example, here, the plant virologist position was actually a core position that came out of one of the units. You can probably guess which one. And they suggested when they made the request that it ought to be not only a core position in their unit, but it ought to be part of the team in the stress biology area. The other 2 areas within the stress biology area are animals, animal systems, and agroecosystems. The third area is large data sets or big data or computational sciences. Use whatever terminology you want here. But the idea is, and I think most of us have come in contact with this, is that we have a tremendous potential to produce data today. When I did useful work as a field researcher, early days of data loggers 20 years ago, 25 years ago, you could put a data logger in the field and you can generate multiple data points per second. So pretty soon you have thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions of data points. But what's important is what information can we get from those data that we have? And there are many areas that this will overlap with, and probably almost all of the areas that those of us in the room work in. Certainly in the area of biological, genomics, genetics, computational biology, that's a large area that is very, very important today. That's getting a lot of interest. But it's not only that. Natural resources, almost any endeavor we have, large data sets are critical to how we manage them, how we glean the data, the information from the data that we have. So this is the first of what we anticipate will be 3 hires or 3 rounds. We will be looking for 3 positions in this cycle, working both in the more theoretical area as well as the application area, working at the 3 different scales that you see there. We will anticipate doing this twice more so that there will be a total of 9 hires over a period of time. And I'll say a little bit more later about how we'll work to fill those positions. The fourth, back up here a little bit. I skipped over a, you're supposed to stop me when I skip over a slide. I knew when I got to healthy systems for agriculture and natural resources I had gone too far. The healthy humans area, we have two categories that we're hiring faculty in, the behavioral studies area and also in food and nutrition. And these are areas that we think we have great strength in. You note the research team that was just recognized certainly fits within what's being done here. Then within the Healthy Systems for Agricultural Production and Natural Resources, we have 2 areas, the beef systems area that we will be making hires in, as well as the High Plains cropping systems. And it shouldn't surprise you that the positions in the High Plains cropping systems area will be located at the Panhandle Research and Extension Center, because that's the best example of high plains that we have within Nebraska. So filling these positions. And I'm not going to get too far down in the weeds with the details here. I do want to note that tomorrow we will be meeting with the unit head and the, just checking to make sure it wasn't mine, the unit head and the 1 or 2 people that the unit head will be working with, and the personnel specialist, the administrative assistant in those units, will be gathering in a collective meeting tomorrow, and we will work with them on the plan that we are laying out to fill these positions. Because I don't think it surprises you that with 36 positions, that's a multi-dimensional challenge that we're facing. There'll be a lot of interviews, a lot of applicants, a lot of search committees, a lot of search committee meetings. And we want to have a structure to assist with these searches, but at the bottom is what we want to highlight. Flexibility in the searches, so that one size we understand will not fit all. And then that the major challenge, our major goal, is to hire the best. Is to hire the best person for each position. We will be providing support for these and other major phases of the searches. We will be helping the units initiate the searches. We will be helping at each stage of the process of identifying the best candidates, of interviewing, and making the hires. Additional support, and here I want to note that Ann Willett, are you here, Ann? Yes. Hire. Ann Willett, who is working in the ARD office, will be helping in the macro sense to manage these searches. That is basically from an organizational standpoint, making certain that everyone has what they need and that no one search is lagging behind for lack of attention. Other individuals that will be helping from our office are Zanetta Hahn, will be available to answer questions, and then of course we all know that the ultimate source of information about searches is Linda Arnold. And Linda will be there to answer questions, but I had to assure that we weren't going to expect her to support all 36 of the searches by herself. But she will be there to lend assistance as needed. For coordination, we're going to attempt to have frequent communication and have a weekly update on where we are with the searches. Feedback throughout this then is going to be very important. Your feedback of the search committees is really very, very helpful to us. So we want that feedback throughout. It's welcome, it's expected, and it will be very helpful to us. Not only between Ag Hall and the units, between you and us, but also among units, between working groups. Very important to have good communication. And finally, I want to wrap this up by saying this is a great opportunity. If you visit with many of your colleagues around the country, probably not very many of them are able to say to you, we're filling positions, at least not at this level. So this is a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity to make good hires. I think it's a great market to be searching and hiring faculty, searching for and hiring faculty members right now. It's, I think, an excellent opportunity to make really good hires. And finally, it is only the first round. We look at this as being the first step in the next cycle. We already, as Ronnie noted in one of his slides, have a second list with 19 positions. When those positions were submitted earlier, we identified the 36 that we plan to fill in this round, but there were some that we were not able to put on the list. We had obviously a fixed amount of resources. So we have a start on the list for the next round, and it's anticipated that we've done a lot of the groundwork, and we will now be able to use this same sort of process for cycle 2, cycle 3, as we go forward from here. So in conclusion, it is a great opportunity. I really personally am asking for your help in all of these searches because it's as a team that we can be most effective in identifying and hiring the very best people, and they're people that you're going to be working with in future years. So we really want and need your help in this process. Thank you very much. Are you next?
Okay, can everybody hear me? Mic's okay? No. I'm already getting heckled here. I want to switch gears a little bit. Those of you that have seen me talk in the past, you know, for over a year I've been selling a PowerPoint. That's all I've had to sell. When I took the job in October, I was told that things were on track. We were going to break ground in April of 2012. Well, we actually broke ground January 3rd of 2013. And people have asked me why, and I've said, well, to paraphrase months and months of discussions and piles of legal documents, the reason is when you're spending $100 million, people get really nervous. They start saying, are we sure we're getting this right? How are we doing this? You know, there's a lot of oh crap moments, okay? And so it's been slowed down, but we're ready to go. We're ready to move forward. I want to give you a little bit of background. Some of you may not have seen what we're doing, but I want to give you a little bit of the reason why things are progressing the way they are. So we have a vision for Innovation Campus, and basically it's a place where the university faculty and private sector scientists can work in a different type of environment, one that we maybe can't achieve on campus. We want to build 2 to 2.5 million square feet on the campus. We only have 96 acres of buildable space because of the floodplain and some other issues. If we build 1 to 2 story buildings, we only get to about 1.5 million square feet. We need to average almost 3 stories on our buildings to get to 2.5 million square feet. So we have to drive vertical development. We have to understand how we can do that. And we have to have the money in place to be able to have shell space. I can tell you right now, I could be leasing out a lot of space if we had it available. People are out there looking for the type of space we're building. And so as we move forward with our growth goals, 80,000 square feet is what we're going to have to get to meet those goals in 25 years. We have to have a lot of shelf space available, and we have to have the funding in place to enable us to do that. So this is a very, very aggressive growth plan that the Board of Directors for Innovation Campus has asked me to try to put together. And we're not there. We're still pulling bits and pieces together to try to figure out how we can expand that rapidly. So we have 3 major themes that came to us from a consulting group. I get challenged on those 3 themes, especially when I'm not talking to people within the Institute. But those 3 themes, the first one's food, and it's really everything from microbiology to what you put in your microwave and nuke at night. It's the full segment between that, and then the university identifying what are those areas where we can really make a difference, where industry will want to engage us, where we have either capacity now or we want to build capacity into the future. Fuel is another area, mostly biofuel, although we're getting some traction from some of solar companies, solar panel companies, with some of the things that are coming out of the university. So it'll be interesting to see how that one develops. And then water is mostly going to be centered around the Doherty Water for Food Institute. So this is a master plan. We've labeled a few things. I think a lot of you kind of know where it is and how we're going to develop it. The city's wastewater treatment plant. It's a huge advantage for us. The city moves 15,000 gallons a minute of about 60-degree water into Salt Creek. If we're going to develop a dense urban downtown city type of environment to drive our development goals, we can't have geothermal well fields. There's no place to put them, okay? So then we're left with traditional boilers and chillers. Well, what we're going to do with that effluent water is we're going to run it through a central energy plant. We're going to run that through heat exchangers, and it's going to work just like a geothermal well field. But that resource will enable us to heat and cool about 1.5 million square feet as it is right now. And that's even more critical to what we want to do with the greenhouses. I'll talk about that in a minute. But we probably wouldn't be able to do what we want to do with the greenhouses if we had a traditional boiler and chiller system. Phase 1, this is the Industrial Arts Building and the current 4-H building. Phase 1 is this area. There's 4 buildings going up in that area. The roadway that will be built as part of Phase 1 will come in here, and then it'll move back out and come out and merge into that road that goes on the north side of Devaney right now. These are the series of 4 buildings that we're going to build. This is the current 4-H building. If you go out there now, you're going to see equipment out there. You're going to see a construction trailer. They're cutting the livestock bowl out of the east side of that, and we're going to build a 400-seat conference center. So 2-story, 400 seats, plug in at every seat so people can plug in their laptops or whatever. On the second floor behind that will be a place where all 400 people can sit at round top tables and have presentations, meal functions, and then breakout rooms below. The west side will be 35,000 square feet of office space. 2-story connector to a new building on the north side. That will be 75,000 square feet. We're going to have a restaurant on the first floor. Amenities are very important to us. We're going to have restaurants, dry cleaning, drop-off, everything that we can do to make life easy for people that work there. Parking's also going to be very good as well. Skybridge to the Life Science Collaboration Center, which are these two buildings. This is a new building. It's a lab building, wet lab building. There's approximately 80,000 square feet of wet lab space in this building. We'll be hooked on to the Industrial Arts building out there, which will be the greenhouse wing of that complex. We'll have 25,000 square feet of greenhouse space on the second floor of this facility. 14,000 square feet of head house space and another 14,000 square feet on the first level. Now, there's a lot of reasons why we're putting greenhouses on the second level. One of them was we had to figure out what to do with this building and how to make it economical. To develop and keep the walls. There was a preservation group that really wanted us to keep this, so this is one of the solutions we came up with. The other issue we have is 25,000 square feet of greenhouse space, 30,000 square feet of head house space. If we put that all on the ground floor, we take up a 50,000 square foot footplate. Okay, so in the long run, down the road, we don't have enough building space because remember, we have to average 3 stories. So there's a lot of reasons that the greenhouses are going on the second floor. But what we're going to do is we're going to come in and stabilize the walls. We're going to pour a double slab floor at 20 feet and put the greenhouses on top. The greenhouses will all be mechanically cooled. We have small areas on campus now where we have mechanically cooled greenhouses, but nothing on this scale. They're all evaporatively cooled. It's difficult to do things in the summer, so this is going to be greenhouse space that we really don't have available. Being able to use the effluent water to cool these spaces makes it possible. If we weren't able to do that and had to do traditional chillers and boilers, it would be cost prohibitive for us to really look at that. So we're really excited about that. The Limnatech high throughput plant phenotyping system is going into this space. That has been paid for through NRI dollars. Pushing incredibly hard right now to get that started with January 1st, 2014 date of the Limnatech system being in that greenhouse, fully operational and ready to go. So we got a little ways to go on this, but we should in the next 2 weeks get that moving. These 2 buildings, they'll be ready for us to move into around January 1st of next year, maybe a little earlier. They're fairly simple builds. We'll move forward with that pretty quickly. The lab building, I'm thinking probably toward the end of the first quarter, start of the second quarter of 2014 is when we'll be available to start moving into that facility. So where'd the funding come from? Remember, $25 million was appropriated by the legislature to kickstart us. We needed to leverage that money into other funds. $10 million is being used to renovate the east half of the 4-H building into the conference center. That is the only portion of the buildings out there that are going to be owned by the university. Everything else is going to be private owned. So those 2 north sets of buildings, we formed a condo association. The university will have 1 unit in a 3-unit condo association. That's what we had to do to get all the legalities in place and be able to get title insurance on the building. $15 million of state money is going into that Life Science Collaboration Center, which is the lab and the greenhouse space. We are working diligently on getting $15 million in philanthropy to go into that facility as well. We have a kind of what I would call a soft commitment. They want to see us raise a little bit more money to go along with that, and so we're working on that. Meeting with Joe Seelig at the foundation this afternoon. Hopefully we'll have a little movement on that. And then our developer partner, non-exclusive developer, Nebraska Nova, they've agreed to match that 40 million with another 40 million. So for just the construction phase, just for the buildings, we hope to have 80 million committed. Now, 80 million doesn't get us in those buildings. I think a lot of people think that, but it doesn't, because we still have to put people in them. We have to build out some space. What 80 million gets us is most of the space build out where it's, we can occupy it, but we still have a ways to go on figuring out how we're going to put IT support services in and some of those types of things. Remember, this is a greenfield site. So up front, you have to invest a lot of money that for certain activities to be able to extend those on in the future. In the next building, it will be markedly cheaper, but we can't put all that burden on the first tenants that go into the building. The city, we have an agreement with them for $10.7 million for infrastructure for phase one. The full TIF funding for the entire project over the 25-year project, we are estimating to be about $30 million. That's roads, sewers, waters, electricity, those types of things. And then $15.6 million for the effluent in bonding authority. Now, when I talk a little bit about the IT development, this is a great example of how you have to front load things. We could not make that central energy plant work in using that effluent at 300,000 square feet that we're building. The break-even point's really more around 500 to 750,000 square feet. So we had to work really hard and try to identify ways that we can make that economical so that the BTU rate will not be any more than within the city of Lincoln for that first set of people that are going into 300,000 square feet. We were able to identify some qualified energy conservation bonds. The state, or the federal government through the stimulus funds had given authority to the states. Some went to Lincoln, the city of Lincoln, some went to Omaha, the state had some authority, the Indian tribes, and I think Sarpy County. None of it had been used. There was a little over 20 million. Through a fairly lengthy process, we were able to get the state to give the city the authority to provide that bonding authority. What that does is the feds write down 70% of the interest rate on those bonds. That gets us to break even at 300,000 square feet and gets us our project going. So we're looking to do that in some other areas. How can we provide an incredibly robust fiber network out there with redundancy in the same way to the first group of people. So where are we at on the first stages? Houseman Construction has the bid on the site development lease, the two buildings to the north. That's the 4-H building and the new building to the north of that. They're out there, they're moving. You're going to see cranes coming in a very short manner of time. The two buildings to the south, because of the industrial arts building, that's going to be very difficult to take that apart. The architects and engineers that were on the case said we have to get a contractor on board, we have to work a solution with them. So that is not being bid out. Kiewit was selected as a contractor at risk. Okay, so they're managing that project, and they have a special engineering unit that works on unique and difficult engineering problems, and they're on this. There's still a chance, if things don't go right, when we start taking that thing apart, that the walls are going to fall down, or a portion of the walls are going to fall down, because it's not easy. So the plan right now is come in on the inside, shore up the walls, with steel, and then start taking it apart. And we have to take out the brick in every one of those arches on that building because of wind load. Okay, so if we get a 60-mile-an-hour wind right in the middle of that, things are going to get dicey. If the crane operator doesn't do things just perfect when they start taking that roof apart, things are going to get interesting. The other thing you're going to be seeing over the next few months is we hired Archie to create a brand identity and a brand identity package for Innovation Campus. We're rolling that out to get the board's initial reaction to that next week. But we think that's very important in being able to develop a brand that will work with other brands. So the university brand, the Doherty Water for Food brand, the ConAgra brand, and we didn't have that in a logo that was developed in a couple of days because we needed a brochure to take to National Bio. So that is another thing you're going to be seeing roll out real quick. A little bit about ConAgra. It's been 5 years in the making to get to this point with them. They're going to be a great partner. When you think about what we need to do at Innovation Campus, it's a lot like a shopping mall. You want to get your big anchor stores in, and then they attract all of the others because of the traffic. So this was incredibly important for us to get ConAgra on board. Other things that are going to happen at Innovation Campus, my office is moving out there. New Tech Ventures, our licensing entity in industry relations. We're going to be office together. This is our outreach effort to private businesses. We meet weekly, myself, David Conrad, and Ryan Anderson, and we're working on ways to try to increase our accessibility and our speed in working with corporate partners. We just hired a contract negotiator that's going to work exclusively on industry contracts. His name's Aaron Funk. He's housed in New Tech, but we need to speed that process up and have it separate from federal grants and contracts. Global Water for Food Institute is moving out to Innovation Campus. And then right now, we've just started advertising for a business accelerator director. And we're going to have a space on Innovation Campus for startup companies, and we're going to work programs. We've already started a program at New Tech that gets startup companies ready to go into an acceleration project. And when they graduate from this acceleration project, the idea is they will be able to survive or have a higher probability of surviving on their own at places like Turbine Flats, Fuse Co-working, or be at the point where a company like Nebraska Global might be interested. So there's those plans, and then there's also plans to help startups that are faculty related, that need lab space and have a much longer time frame on them. What research is going to happen on Innovation Campus right now? The high throughput phenotyping system is going out there. Maybe the ConAgra tomato program, a final decision hasn't been made on that, but they need 9,000 square feet of greenhouse space. They want to have some processing equipment in conjunction with those tomatoes. And so it probably makes sense to have all of that out there, but we're just starting those discussions. Some of you have been contacted by Brian Larkins. He's pulling together some groups of faculty. There have been meetings with the vice chancellors and department heads. Now we're rolling this out to faculty to start talking about what programs the university would want to put on Innovation Campus. So there's multiple ways faculty can be involved with Innovation Campus. The university is going to rent space at Innovation Campus, and that's the process I just described to you, where Brian Larkins is inviting some faculty in to start talking about this. So that's one way, and that's a university-funded way. If you're a faculty member and you have a huge need for additional space, you have a lot of grant and contract coming in, and you have a way that you know how to pay for the rent on that space, that's a different conversation, okay? You can work directly through your department head and with us to make that happen. If you have a business partner, and that business partner says, we'll pay for the space, we want you to manage this lab for us or work with us in this lab, that's a different conversation. And then what I also want to say is, you know, how you would interact with Innovation Campus is really, I hope, only limited to two things. Number one, your imagination as faculty and our ability to put finances with that to make it come to reality. So nothing is crazy. Please contact me if you're interested, and we'll work through any process we can. What are our keys to success? You saw a lot of them in Ronnie's talk today. Nationally, if you look at why companies come to research parks, when you look at the data, there's two reasons: access to faculty and access to students. They want great employees. They want faculty that have expertise that they don't have, they can't afford, core facilities they can't afford, those types of things. So that is really important to us. Those presidential chairs, retaining faculty that are here, recruiting great new partners is all directly relatable to our keys to success. We're going to run a lot of programs at Innovation Campus for students. We're going to give students mechanisms to start their own businesses if they want to. We're going to have internships with the companies that are out there. So student recruitment, student growth, attracting certain types of students. I've been contacted multiple times already by students that are enrolling as an 18-year-old that already have a business, and they want to know where they can meet their clients on campus. Is there a space that they could have a professional looking space to meet their clients on campus? So I think if we do this right, that'll help us with student recruitment as well. Continued legislative support, consistent stakeholder support, philanthropy. I'm going to correct Ronnie a little bit. He said we want to finish up the fundraising for Innovation Campus. Well, we're going to finish phase 1 of the fundraising and move into phase 2, 3, and 4. And then finally, you know, we all have to keep the faith. This has been a little bit like a field of dreams. It's a field of dreams with a lot of money behind it, but we're still trying to figure out processes. We're still trying to figure out if we move faculty out there, what's that do to departments on campus? How do we interact with that? There's a whole host of things that have to still be figured out, and we've never done it before. I've never run a research park before. Ronnie's never figured out how to move faculty out there before. So there's a whole dynamic here that we have to think about, and we ask for your patience, we ask for your support, and we ask for your insight on how to do that, how you see that playing out with your programs, with your department, and how we can have a dynamic future together. So with that, I don't know who's up next. Chuck?
Thank you very much. Greetings, everybody. It's great to be with you this morning, and thank you for being patient. This is kind of an extended session for you, but I do appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about UNL Extension and some of the things that we're talking about relative to the Rural Futures Institute. And, you know, this is one of the things and one of the reasons I was so interested in coming back to Nebraska. Certainly it's my alma mater, certainly it's my home, and I love Nebraska, but what really excited me was the great ideas, the innovations, the projects, the programs that this university is launching into right now. And I like to be part of stuff like that. And this Rural Futures Institute is a really great example of exactly that. Now, I know last May when we had our first conference, that there were conversations about Extension's role in the Rural Futures Institute, and some people who said, well, duh, it's a no-brainer, and other people who said, is Extension going to step up? And I think both of those are really, really good questions as we think about what Extension's role might be. So as we think about this, what we've done, and I'll kind of outline a process for you here today that talks about that, is to first of all spend a little time thinking about what is the RFI and what are we really trying to accomplish. And you know, this mission statement, building upon strengths, innovation and entrepreneurship, mobilizing resources and talents, and then action to help communities achieve their desired futures. These are exciting ideas, and these ideas are very consistent with the kinds of things that Extension does and the kinds of things that we're proud of in Extension. The other thing about the RFI are the core values, and these are exciting as well. And in fact, some are right in line with Extension, and some of these are aspirational. We're going to challenge ourselves to be better as we think about these things. So things about being opportunistic, being transdisciplinary, and an area where we have true opportunity to build capacity, being creative, being reflective and collaborative and sustainable, and above all, bold. And sometimes in Extension, we don't always think in the boldest ways possible. And so this challenges us to think about how can we be bold in the way we engage and help our rural communities be successful. Well, as you get to know me a little bit, you'll begin to understand that one of the things that I do as I think about big ideas like this is that I like to be very consultative. I like to engage people in conversation, and you'll hear more about that here in just a minute. But we're going to start with data, and that's the way we started our conversation around Extension's role in the RFI. So we gathered information from the North Central region. There's a lot of states around us that are doing work with communities, and we looked at that information and what they're doing. We did a survey of UNL Extension faculty, and then we also conducted 3 focus groups with our faculty to get more in-depth understanding of what they were thinking about. I'm not going to go through the whole faculty survey, but there's a couple of things here that I think are really important. First of all, 306 people responded. That's pretty darn good. I'm excited about that. That says people wanted to be part of this conversation. The second thing that I think is really interesting and important is that there were 28% of Extension educators who responded, 27% of Extension specialists who responded who said, we're doing this right now. We're engaged in the kinds of programs or projects that enhance rural communities. But here's the best news. Over the next 3 to 5 years, 51% of the educators who responded, 47% of specialists said, we'd like to do more. Tell us what the opportunities are. Help us understand what that looks like. We're ready to jump in. We're ready to make a commitment. And so I think that's really, really exciting. We think there's really 2 important questions. The first one is, how can UNL Extension be seamlessly engaged with the Rural Futures Institute? That's a really important question. Is Extension going to be a key part of the RFI? Or are we just going to kind of be a contractor? I think our interest is to be seamlessly engaged. And so if we're going to do that, what does that look like? And then the second piece about what kinds of programs could we do, could Extension do in Nebraska that would help the RFI achieve its mission? And so we're going to try and respond to those 2 questions a little bit today. These ideas are in a concept paper that I distributed to our Extension professionals yesterday, actually Tuesday evening. And we're going to continue this conversation, but here's a couple of ideas for you. We believe Extension is uniquely positioned to be a key player, and here's why. A network of professionals across this state that are embedded in local communities. We live there, we work there, we raise our families there. We're connected with local communities in unique ways. We're embedded in rural communities. We have a 4-H program that engages 1 in 3 age-eligible youth in the state of Nebraska. 140,000 kids. That's a huge opportunity as we think about what we really want to accomplish. We have the capacity to facilitate and lead research and education projects that impact communities, and we're part of a national system that thinks about these ideas a lot. Well, what would a seamless and strategic partnership look like? What are some of the things that we could do to be a player? The Extension Director role has been suggested as an opportunity to be in a leadership role with the RFI. We would like RFI leadership and staff to be engaged in our action teams that are focusing in this area. We see Extension faculty as grassroots eyes and ears to help inform the RFI about the kinds of opportunities and needs and the things that we could do in rural communities. We'd really like to connect Extension folks with RFI grantees, and we just completed the first round of research and teaching grants through the RFI. We like Extension to be a conduit to all 4 campuses. And this one's especially important, we would like Extension faculty to contribute to the scholarship of what it takes to help rural communities be successful. And we're already going to do that because 2 of the 5 research grants that were just awarded through the RFI are coming to Extension professionals. We have capacity to help with the kinds of things that advance rural communities. We'd like to be a testing ground for new ideas, and we'd like to have communications and linkages with other land grants. Those are important pieces. So as we think about how this might work in Extension, one approach is to form a community vitality action team. Now, that's just an idea. Not even sure it's the right title, but it sounds kind of good, and we kind of like it from that perspective. And the reason to form an action team is not, as some have suggested, to form another silo. If we in fact buy into the RFI model mission statement, it's more than that. But it's a way to gather people together who have expertise and interest in this area, to facilitate a conversation, to do some planning and implementation, and think about what kinds of signature programs might we want to deliver in this RFI model. So here's the goal that we're proposing for this new Community Vitality Action Team. And this really came right out of the RFI conference in May, that we would like to be part of a process to increase the intersections of ideas and resources. And to me, that's an image I can really get excited about. There's a great image right there. As you think about how ideas and resources come together, it's kind of like 2 hot electric wires. When they touch, they spark. The spark is an opportunity. It encourages us to think about what could be. And so this intersection idea is an idea that we can really build on. So we're going to talk quickly about 3 signature areas where we would do programming. And again, these are ideas. The first one is focused on growing rural Nebraska businesses and supporting entrepreneurship and being more engaged in local foods and ag products and working with agritourism and helping people come to rural Nebraska. And some of those folks are going to be folks with ideas and resources that might want to stay there. So this is a key part. And as Ronnie mentioned earlier, this whole idea of wealth transfer that's going to occur over the next 5 to 10 years, and can we help people think about how some of that wealth might be used to further local communities and the kinds of things that local communities want to address. A second signature area around youth, and you're going to see a theme through all 3 of these signature areas that our interest is really in engaging youth and young people, because that's the future of our rural communities. If we can't attract young people back to our rural communities, we're not going to be successful. So youth engaged with adults in meaningful leadership experiences. We do a lot of leadership, but what we're talking about here are the genuine ways that young people might be involved in leadership. Youth serving partners. We're bold enough to think that we could actually help other people who are in youth serving organizations be better at it and improve the kinds of learning experiences that young people might have. Create opportunities in workforce development to help young people discover viable careers and career choices that would position them to be part of businesses and organizations in rural communities. And then young adults who will own or manage more businesses. I think that's a key part as well. The third signature program area that we're interested in is how do we help communities develop a community where young people, young adults like to live and work and raise their families. This is really an important part. And so engaging with leadership to be more diverse in their interest and ideas and opportunities. Focusing on developing a larger and better educated workforce. One of the biggest challenges that we have in rural Nebraska is when you have 2% unemployment, what company is going to want to come there and try to compete with everybody else for workers. So this is a big, big issue. Community infrastructure that supports entrepreneurship and business development, and then rural communities that attract and retain young people. So this whole idea of creating communities that attract young people. We know there's a lot of things that Extension needs to talk about as we think about our potential engagement in this. And certainly some of these things are around the connection to the RFI, our role with the other campuses, our culture around doing this kind of work. If we develop a new community vitality action team, what does that look like? Who's going to be responsible for delivering this kind of programming? And then one that we view as really important is we need to strengthen our capacity to support community vitality research. Next steps, and this is out there. We already have 2 Adobe Connect sessions scheduled. We're going to invite everybody to have a conversation with us about these ideas. We'll accept comments through about the end of January. We'll revise our document and get it back out to everybody as we think about this. This is particularly important timing as we go into the search for the director, the inaugural director of the Rural Futures Institute. So as we look forward, we believe that the Extension and the Rural Futures, our missions, our core values are aligned. That's an opportunity. We'd like to contribute to new knowledge. We'd like to catalyze important work. We'd like to be innovative in the way we engage rural communities. We have a ready connection with Nebraska's youth, a huge opportunity in the RFI. And then this last point about the intersections between ideas and resources that can help make this happen. So I hope you can tell we're excited about this conversation. We're excited about the opportunity. We're looking forward to additional interaction around this as we go forward to try and figure out exactly what is Extension's role in the Rural Futures Institute. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark.
Good morning. I guess since I'm the last speaker, I'm going to be the one that's responsible for perhaps going over time, but I'm going to try to be quick and brief. As Ronnie said, we started the new Office of Global Engagement opened on November 1st of last year. So we're a very, very new office. I'm originally from a small town in Illinois. I did my graduate work at the University of Wisconsin. And over the past 7 years, though, I've been working in very extensively in international activities, and I look forward to continuing that work here at the University of Nebraska. I also just want to say that over the past couple of months, I've had a lot of conversations, many with people in this room and across the Institute. I understand that this office, or the capacity that this office brings to the university to the Institute, hasn't been here for about 10 years. But I also really fully realize that that doesn't mean that international engagement and international activities haven't been going on during that time. So I really appreciate everyone's willingness to share and what's going on internationally here on campus. And I look forward to continuing those conversations and working to strategize with you as we move forward. Ronnie talked a little bit about the state of the agriculture economy in Nebraska and how it's growing. I think it's important to point out that one of the reasons for this growth is an increase in exports. Whether we like it or not, Nebraska is becoming more and more connected with the world around us, and emerging markets are actually a major source for products made right here in Nebraska. This presents a challenge to us. I think as we become more engaged and more integrated in the global economy, we need to figure out ways to provide new services to enable people to engage in this new economy. And we really need to train students so that they're able to get jobs in the global marketplace and give students a global perspective. Additionally, the research enterprise is also becoming more global. When we talk about the big research questions of today, there's often talk of global health, global climate change, global food security. And if we're going to continue to be a leader in research and extension here at University of Nebraska, we need to continue to engage internationally and increase those efforts. Publication rates are increasing dramatically in foreign countries. We're seeing centers of excellence arise in these countries. And in order for us to truly stay engaged and remain a leader, we need to be fully engaged with some of these institutions as they arise. There's already been some strategic thinking in the Nebraska system as to how we're going to engage internationally. Varner Hall has placed an emphasis on the so-called BRIC countries, Brazil, Russia, India, and China. And I think this is actually quite good for us here at the Institute because we have a lot of talents here, a lot of capabilities here that I think are going to allow us to engage with these countries quite well. These countries are, China and India in particular, are the two countries that are sending the most students to the United States. And from the conversations I've had with people here, I think there's tremendous potential and already a lot of ongoing activities with Brazil. So I wanted to summarize a couple of those now. Ronnie mentioned we'll be going to China next week. And one of our goals there is to connect and engage with the office that we opened in Beijing last year. This is a one-of-a-kind office. We're the only university in the country to have such an office. I think it's an experiment on our side. It's an experiment on their end as well. And we're currently trying to figure out what is the best way for us to utilize this office and use it to our advantage to better engage in China. We also have some really quickly growing relationships with universities in China. Last weekend, President Zhang from Jiangjiaotong University was here on campus to talk about potential interactions in agricultural engineering, water, and food safety. He even took a tour of the tractor test facility and sat in in the big tractors there. I think it was a wonderful image. Ronnie and I will also be visiting Northwest Ag and Forestry University, which is right up the road from Xi'an. We currently have a very active student exchange program there, and we're looking at ways to build around that to increase our interactions with this agricultural university. Brazil, as I said, talking to people around the Institute, there's already a lot going on with Brazil. We have a lot of Brazilian students here, a lot of faculty that have spent a lot of time in Brazil. We're constantly building and creating new agreements with Brazilian institutions, and I'm very, very excited about this, the opportunities here. One of these opportunities, many of you have probably heard of the Science Without Borders program, which is now the Brazil Scientific Mobility Program. The Brazilian government has made a decision to invest in sending 100,000 Brazilian students overseas to get undergraduate, master's, and PhD degrees. 50% of those, so 50,000 degrees, are slated to come to the United States. And currently, University of Nebraska has housed or has hosted more students than any other university in the country. So we are looking to continue to build on those relationships and to get more of those Brazilian students studying in the Institute, in Kasner, and as the graduate students come in labs here in the Institute. I just also wanted to quickly mention India. Chancellor Perlman recently took a trip to India and took several IANR faculty members with him. Those were quickly building relations there. And also recently, President Milliken took a delegation to Turkey, which I know is not in the brick line here, but he sees a lot of potential there. And again, several IANR faculty members traveled with President Milliken to Turkey, so I think there's going to be some opportunities there as well. And then finally, about kind of the big picture, like thinking strategically, again, I think if we're going to continue to be a leader in ag research and extension, it's really important to kind of think forward and ask ourselves, where are the areas in the world where our expertise, our going to be the most needed. And so, looking forward, I hope we can continue to build our programs in areas like sub-Saharan Africa, where I think looking forward house many of the countries that are going to have the greatest food security risks. So other countries and regions. Again, in a number of the conversations I've had, people have said, well, we know about these priority countries, but I'm interested in working in Mexico, or I'm interested in working in Sweden. These are on the priority countries, so what am I to do? And I just want to say that we do have these priorities, but I really see the role of my office to help encourage and enable faculty and students to do research and study in any country that they want to do research in. And so, my work at NSF and at USAID, one thing I learned is that research can and is often very site dependent, especially internationally. There are certain types of research that can only be done in certain areas of the world, and we need to be sure that we're fully supportive of faculty members who want to go to these places and engage with research institutions and field sites in very specific areas of the world. So currently, within IANR and CASNR, we have about 55 active international agreements in about 25 different countries. New agreements are being developed all the time. And again, my thinking towards this is, as we develop these agreements, and as my office hopefully helps people in developing these agreements, that we think about agreements that have substance, so that are more than just a handshake, but actually have a plan of developing joint activities and research. And also, I think agreements that really leverage our unique capabilities here as a university. Every major university in the United States is trying to up their international programs and internationalize. And so I think it is important to sit back and think, what are the unique qualities and what are the unique talents that exist here on East Campus, and how do we use those, how do we leverage those talents to find the international agreements and international activities that are really going to carry us forward. And finally, I'd like to talk a little bit about students. I'm very pleased that both CASNR and the College of Education and Human Sciences have gone together. They're in the process of hiring a new study abroad coordinator. I'm hoping that person will work very, very closely with my office in hopes of increasing the number of international students here on campus. As you can see, relative to other Big Ten schools, we are a little bit on the low side. And I think that with the goals of increasing student populations here on campus, that international students can actually play a very major role in achieving those goals. We also really need to put some effort into getting our students to have international experiences, getting students overseas into study abroad programs, getting them involved in faculty-led trips, and hopefully international internships as well. Again, I think this is just a really key component if we're going to give our students the global education that they need to succeed in today's global world. Okay, so really briefly then, as I said, we're a brand new office. So we still don't have an office website. So I wanted to lay out just some of the plans for the next 3 to 6 months. First and foremost, we will be developing a website, and I hope that this will serve as a resource for the Institute, sort of a way for us to communicate our study abroad activities, funding opportunities that have an international angle to them, and also highlight many of the ongoing international activities that we currently have on campus. And again, in order for us to highlight, we have to know about them. So I guess one of my last pitches here is, please engage with us, especially at this early stage. We're very interested to know your ideas and how we're going to, if we don't have a handle on what types of international activities are currently going on here on campus, it's very hard for us to try to be strategic moving forward. As I said, we really need to collect data. We want to develop an international database, identify regional expertise among people here at the Institute, so that when a new faculty member comes and says, I want to engage internationally, he or she is not necessarily starting at ground zero. I want to pool some of our collective knowledge so that we can be a resource for people in their international endeavors. And I think this will also give us an opportunity to identify needs and opportunities moving forward. And finally, to sort of help me and my office in this area, I'm hoping that over the next 3 to 6 months, I'll lay the foundation for an international advisory committee here on campus, composed of faculty, staff, and hopefully students, to help again get the word out about what we're doing, do some strategic planning, figure out what types of programs we need, and finally what types of services my office might be able to provide to, again, really help enable faculty members to work internationally and just kind of make that whole process easier. I've been told we need to work on this picture, so this is probably the last time you'll see this. But we're on the 3rd floor of Ag Hall. We're fully staffed, I guess, at the moment. So I'm very pleased to be working with Dr. Liana Caligare, maybe, and Miranda Ducey. Maybe you can stand. Liana is Brazilian. She got her PhD at the University of Sao Paulo, Isalki, and has been doing wonderful work on trying to build our partnerships with Brazil. And Miranda is our new administrative associate. She's taking the lead on the website and everything else in the office. So a big thanks to them, and really a big thanks to all of you. I especially want to thank Arlen Ettling and Osman Yum for their help as I start this new office and getting me up to speed on international. And of course, all the great people in the Vice Chancellor's office and everyone else who's really made me feel welcome and really glad that I came to Nebraska. So thank you very much.
Well, I don't know, is this hot? Is it? Do I have to eat it? Okay. So thank you to Ron and to Dan and to Chuck and to Mark. We know this has kind of been a long session, but we intentionally wanted you to hear about some of the implementation. So how are we going about doing some of these kinds of things that we've been talking to you about at the conceptual level for the last 4 or 5 of these sessions. Now, I know I realize people need to go. Please feel free to go if you need to. But if there are questions that you would like to address to us, we do have a little bit of time here for that. And I think all of our speakers, without Dan had to go, we can address anything you'd like to bring up in an open time of Q&A now. So, fire. One thing I did want to add, a couple of pieces of information. One is at Innovation Campus, when Dan was talking about the Limnatech system, the high throughput phenotyping system on the plant side in the greenhouses. That is a huge opportunity for us. It has an additional component to it that we didn't originally purchase through the research initiative funds that Dan mentioned are paying for that system, that deals with Arabidopsis. So it allows us to work on the model species Arabidopsis that's so important to a lot of our plant scientists and people working in that arena. I am going to fund that and be able to add that capacity to the Limnatech system. It's about a $450,000 addition to that system to give it full capacity, to really expand its ability for our scientists and for our partners that are coming to Innovation Campus. We're excited about that, and I know Jim would love to hear it, so I wanted to say it while Jim was here. And then lastly, on these international deals, you know, I will tell you, I was kidding people in the back that, you know, getting on a plane to go to China Saturday morning is not my idea of a lot of fun, to be real honest. I would prefer to stay home and be with my wife. I said that. Oh boy, but no, these international trips are not the easiest thing in the world to do. A lot of you have been doing them and have been spending time internationally to develop these agreements. It's hard work, and we appreciate people doing that. Number one. Number two, they are important. So you know, when we're in China next week. Rolando in the back, he's going to be going with us. Rolando just got back from India, actually, and he's turning around and going back to China. What we're going to be doing is we're going to actually be signing several agreements for the university when we're there. And we're going to be signing an agreement with what's called IWHR in China, the Water and Hydropower Research Institute in China on water and development of irrigation in northeast China, which is a huge need for them. That's in our overall water for food kind of area. We're going to be signing an agreement with China Agricultural University, which is the leading ag university in China, to facilitate collaborations with our faculty. We've already done that with Northwest A&F University that Mark and I'll be visiting out in the Xi'an part of the country while we're there. So believe me, they're not jaunts. We're over there working hard for you to try to develop paths to be able to facilitate these kinds of research. And I was kidding Rolando, he came back from India and he has a very new suave look about him. So I'm wondering what his China look's going to be when we come back from China next week. So anyway, what kinds of questions and answers can we provide for you? Do a little Q&A here if there are questions that you might have for any of us. Or online. Now, Jill told me to say there also is a box online that you can go and post questions to us that we can answer by email as well. So if you want to go there and do that on an email forum, we're providing that opportunity as well, especially for folks online. Any questions from the floor or online? Well, thank you for being here, and appreciate everything that you do every day. As we say, every time we're together, we're doing important work, and you're the people that do it, and we really appreciate what you do every day. Thank you.